A man left his wife alone with 3 children and came to the dilapidated house she inherited, intending to mock her. But when he saw what was lying in the old chest, he gasped. "See you soon," Mia said warmly and pressed the end call button. She took off her headset. The consultation had dragged on. It was time to rush to pick up the children, who she had left with her neighbor, the kind Dona Chita, who often helped her out. Mia and her husband, Luis, had 3 children. Their eldest, Raul, had just turned 6, Idoia was 4, and their youngest daughter, Nina, was only a year old. Despite having this wonderful group of little ones, Mia still managed to work. She privately consulted people. She was considered a good psychologist and was highly regarded at the psychological help center she collaborated with, often being recommended by clients who sought their services. She also had plenty of her own clients through word of mouth. Mia glanced at the clock, 9 p.m. Luis still wasn't home. She quickly dialed his number, but all she got were long beeps, and then she was prompted to leave a message. Strange, where could he have gone? Dona Chita lived on their floor. Mia pressed the doorbell. The neighbor greeted Mia with a smile. "Hello, my dear, we're having some evening tea. Come join us." "Dona Chita, thank you so much." "I couldn't have managed without you," Mia said gratefully as she stepped into the neighbor's small apartment. "I've sent you some money." "How many times have I told you, Maida, you don't need to do that. I'm happy to spend time with your little ones." "You know I have no children or grandchildren of my own," sighed the elderly woman. "Yes, but that's no reason for me to take advantage of your kindness," Mia replied cheerfully as they walked to the kitchen, where the kids were happily sipping tea and eating cookies. "Mom," they all exclaimed in unison. "Hello, my sweeties." Mia smiled at them. "Were you good? Did you listen to Dona Chita?" "Yes," they all chorused again. They were having tea with cookies baked by the neighbor. Dona Chita was always baking something, cookies, buns, or cupcakes. She herself resembled a rosy little bun, round and smooth. "Is Luis home?" Dona Chita asked, pouring Mia some more tea. "He's not answering his phone, and he hasn't come home yet," Mia replied. "Maybe he's found someone else," the neighbor quietly suggested. "I doubt it. He's probably just avoiding me and the kids. You know, Luis is a bit peculiar." "Yes, just like his late father," Dona Chita said, sipping her tea. When Mia and the children returned to their apartment, Luis still wasn't home. After putting the kids to bed, Mia went to the kitchen. She decided to wait a bit longer, maybe Luis would come after all. But 2 hours passed, the clock showed midnight, and he still hadn't returned. Mia went to bed, deciding it was pointless to wait any longer. Luis came home just before lunchtime the next day. "What happened?" his wife asked, meeting him at the door with Nina in her arms. "What's that smell?" He wrinkled his nose. "When was the last time you checked the baby's diaper?" "We're just about to deal with that," Mia joked. "Can you do it somewhere else? Is something wrong?" Mia asked calmly. "Yes, I'm going to Matthias's place in Cyprus for a week. I hope you'll have enough time to move out." "What? You want me and the kids to leave?" "Yes, I do. We can't be together anymore. Looks like you've got somewhere to go now, haven't you? Your uncle left you a house, if you can even call that shack a house," he said as he walked into the bathroom. Mia went to the nursery to change Nina's diaper. She realized she still hadn't even gone to see the house her Uncle Fede had left her. Maybe now was the time. Uncle Federico had died just over 6 months ago. He was her mother's brother, who had passed away when Mia was 12. Uncle Fede had lived a reclusive life in his small house in a little village not far from the city where Mia and her family lived. He had no heirs, so the house was left to his only niece. Mia hadn't visited him in a long time. Her uncle wasn't exactly hospitable, and she hadn't wanted to intrude on his life. Federico Campos was found dead in his house, discovered only because a neighbor stopped by to borrow a screwdriver. And just like that, Mia lost her last blood relative, aside from her father, who wanted nothing to do with her. Did Luis wait until I had somewhere else to go? Mia wondered as she changed Nina. Mom, where did Dad go? Raul asked, running into the room. He's already gone? Mia asked in surprise. Did he take a suitcase? Yeah, he shoved it into the trunk and left without even saying goodbye. He must have had urgent business. But we're going to check out our new house today, Mia winked at her son. What house? Raul asked, his eyes lighting up with interest. Uncle Feed left it to us, sweetheart. Where's Idoia? She's drawing in the living room. Where's the house, Mom? Not too far from here, honey. Let's have a snack, and then we'll go. Yay! Raul exclaimed and ran out of the room. Yule, Nina babbled with a smile. Yes, little one, Raul is excited. Are you happy too? The girl clapped her hands and started kicking her legs joyfully as she sat on the changing table, which she had long outgrown but still loved to sit on because of its soft surface. Mia turned off the engine. The little house looked sad. It clearly needed repairs, and the lawn in front of it was so overgrown that it was hard to imagine anyone had ever lived there. The siding was peeling off in some places, barely holding on, exposing insulation that had been picked at by birds. The windows were dirty, and one of them even had a broken pane. Well, what an inheritance I've got, Mia muttered, opening the car door. Raul, the eldest of her children, was the first to jump out of the car. Mia helped her daughters unbuckle, and they made their way toward their new home. I want to live here, Raul exclaimed, the adventurer and lover of all things new. The glass is broken, Idoia wrinkled her nose, pointing at the damaged window. No big deal. Like pirates. Raul dashed across the overgrown lawn, full of excitement. Oh. Nina started calling out, pulling away from her mother. She was ready to follow her big brother everywhere, copying everything he did. Be careful, sweetie, Mia said, letting go of her daughter's hand. Mom, why did we come here? Idoia began whining. She was nothing like Raul or Nina. From a young age, she had preferred comfort and enjoyed drawing and looking at pictures rather than noisy games or riding a scooter. Idoia, this is where we're going to live now, Mia said, taking her daughter's hand. What? And Dad? He went away on business. He probably won't be back for a while. Mia, who had always easily found the right words when working with clients, now found herself at a loss. How could she explain to her 4-year-old daughter that her father had kicked them all out of the house and that, essentially, they were no longer needed? I don't want to live here. It's dirty. We'll fix it up. The house will be beautiful and cozy. Mia hoped she could manage that. Fortunately, the car belonged to her, and she had some savings. Now she had to rely solely on herself and her consultations, which didn't bring in much income. After all, Mia couldn't afford to work long hours, her children took up almost all her time. And now, without Donachita nearby, who would help with the kids? Mia did her best to make life comfortable for the children, but things were going terribly. The worst part was that the roof leaked. She discovered it one night when the kids were already asleep, all three sharing Uncle Feed's big bed. Mia was sleeping on an inflatable camping mattress that she had taken with her when she left her husband's house, a house that had never really become hers. Mia woke up to the sound of water dripping nearby. Luckily, it wasn't in the bedroom but near the staircase. She spent half the night running around, searching for a suitable basin to catch the water and trying to figure out what could be done. Living like this was impossible. The house quickly began to smell of dampness, making it feel even more uncomfortable and bleak. The children, especially Idoia, were already struggling with the move from their familiar home and their father, despite his limited involvement in their lives. Even Raul, who usually loved discovering new things and seeking out adventures, grew sad and sometimes refused to play with his ball or build houses from his construction sets, though those had always been his two favorite activities. Mia called a dozen roofing companies, but their prices left the poor single mother in shock. When she realized that continuing to call around was pointless, she stepped outside. She decided to tidy up the utterly neglected lawn in front of the house. She raked the dry grass and leaves that covered the ground in a thick layer. "Hello." She suddenly heard a voice nearby. Mia looked up. A girl of about 11 stood in front of her. "Hi," the woman smiled at her. "Do you live here now?" "Yes." "And where do you live?" "Not far from here. In the house with the brown roof. My dad built it himself." "Wow. That's amazing. Did he roof it too?" Mia couldn't help but ask the question. It had been bothering her for 2 days now. "Of course, he did. My dad's quite the builder," the girl said proudly. "What's your name?" "Clara." "And you?" "Mia." She extended her hand to the girl. Clara shook it and smiled. "Clara, could you give me your dad's phone number? I'd like to ask his advice about our roof. It's leaking." "Sure, I'll write it down for you." Clara pulled a tiny pencil and a small notebook from her jeans pocket. "Here you go." She handed her a pink slip of paper. "I didn't know there were still girls who carried notebooks and pencils in their pockets." Mia smiled warmly. "I always have a notebook and pencil with me. You never know when you'll need to write something down. Phones just aren't the same." "I completely agree with you. Phones aren't the same at all." They both laughed. Felipe Soto came the next day to inspect the roof. "It's not as bad as I expected," he smiled, wiping his hands with a large handkerchief. "Really? Could you fix it? In installments?" "I'll fix it for you, neighborly-like," Felipe chuckled. "No, really, I'll pay. Just not all at once. The companies gave me such high estimates that I was stunned and stopped searching. I'm so glad I ran into Clara yesterday. She's such a sweet girl." "Thank you, Mia. She liked you too. She wouldn't have started a conversation with you if you lived in any other house." "Really? Why?" "She's a bit of a loner, shy and lost in her own world. Clara was very fond of Senor Campos. She often ran over for tea with him. He told her about birds and plants. Yes, Uncle Feed was a biologist through and through. He could draw birds and animals so well. He lived alone all his life," Mia sighed. "Would you like some tea?" "I'd love some," Felipe smiled, following Mia into the house. They drank tea with honey cake that Mia had baked that morning. "Do you have 3 kids?" "Uh-huh," Mia responded. "And your husband?" "Sorry if I'm intruding. My husband is a man who's gotten incredibly lost. He decided he'd be better off without us, and I didn't argue. This house was left to me by my uncle, so we moved here. It's not exactly luxury living, but in time I think we can turn it into a little paradise," Felipe finished for her. "I'm sure you'll do a great job." "Thank you, Felipe. Your daughter is very lucky to have you as a father. Her mother passed away a few years ago. It was tough at first, but we managed. You know what condition she gave me for choosing a new partner?" Felipe chuckled. "What was it?" "That I wouldn't let myself get wrapped around the finger of some airhead who only cares about silly things." "Wow. Clara is wise beyond her years," Mia shook her head. "Just like her mother," Felipe smiled sadly. "Can I have some more cake? It's really good." "Of course. I'll pack a couple of slices for Clara to take home." "Thanks a lot. No one spoils her with homemade treats, so she'll appreciate it." "Do you work as a builder?" "Yes, I take on jobs, though sometimes I have to leave Clara alone for a couple of days, or even 3. If she ever needs anything, she can come over to us," Mia offered. Now that the roof doesn't leak anymore, she looked gratefully at Felipe. "Thanks, Mia. Do you work?" "Yes, I consult people remotely. I'm a psychologist." "Oh. That's great. And I'm also working on a book. The material is ready, I just need to put it together, but progress is slow. It's so inconvenient typing on a laptop. Well, why don't you buy a keyboard and connect it to your laptop? Felipe took a sip of tea. Of course. Why didn't I think of that sooner? Silly me. What will your book be about? If it's not a secret, of course. It's a small book about an experiment I conducted. If I manage to publish it, I'll definitely give you a copy. They chatted for a while longer, and then Mia saw Felipe to the door. Meanwhile, the children were playing ball on the lawn in front of the house, which Mia had managed to bring to a more or less decent condition. Even little Nina wasn't fussy. The fresh air was doing wonders for the kids. Time passed. Mia didn't call Luis or interfere in his life. Sometimes Dona Chita called. She would tell Mia that Luis was always alone, never brought anyone home, and sometimes went away for a few days. The book was progressing well and quite quickly. The psychological center Mia was collaborating with was eagerly awaiting the manuscript and had promised to cover all the publication costs. Clara had become a frequent visitor at Uncle Feed's house. She loved spending time with the girls, and they absolutely adored her, jumping and squealing with joy when they saw her through the window. Raul started attending the local school, signed up for a soccer club, made friends who shared his interests, and was truly happy. He hardly ever mentioned his father. Nina had become much calmer than when they lived in the city apartment, as there were no longer the frequent arguments that Luis used to start. Even Mia felt better. It was hard to juggle caring for the kids, working, and writing a book. The center had started nudging her to finish. Mia hoped that by Christmas, the book would be ready for publication. The book was published even earlier than Mia expected. Dona Chita came to stay for a while. Listen, dear, maybe I should sell my little apartment and buy a house somewhere nearby, she said with a laugh, unpacking all sorts of goodies from her bottomless bag. Dona Chita, why did you carry all this? It must have been heavy. Mia replied with a smile. It's nothing, I'm still a tough old bird. Besides, it's worth it to see the smiles on your faces. You're no old bird. You are a sweet bun. They hugged. It was so wonderful to see each other again after months of separation. They had missed each other terribly. How's your book, Mia? I'm writing. Now I think I'll have more time, especially with the kids busy with you, if you don't run away from us. Run away? You'll be begging me to leave. The air here is so good, I feel 10 years younger. By early winter, the small book written by Mia Torres had already been published. Her client base had grown even larger. Dona Chita's visit was perfectly timed, and even better, she wasn't in any hurry to leave. The children adored her. Even Clara, who remained a regular guest at Uncle Feed's house, was fond of the nanny, as everyone called her now. That old name stuck to the house and refused to go away. A couple of weeks before Christmas, something unexpected happened. Mia was home alone. After sending the children off for a walk with Nanny Chita, she decided to rest a bit and at the same time decorate the house for the holidays. Just the other day, she and the kids had bought a ton of Christmas decorations. Mia sat in the living room on the floor, sorting through garlands and planning where to hang them. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a car pulling up to the house. It stopped near the garage. Mia jumped to her feet and rushed to the window. Who could it be? She wasn't expecting any deliveries. When she looked outside, her jaw dropped. Luis Torres, her husband, was getting out of the car. What did he want? Why had he come here? To laugh at how badly she was doing without him? Not a chance. Mia threw on a windbreaker and stepped out onto the porch. Well, hello. Luis greeted her with a sarcastic tone. Hello. What brings you here? You're not even going to invite me in? I don't really want to, but it's windy out, so come in. They walked into the living room. Sorry, I'm in the middle of Christmas prep. Do you want some tea? No, thanks. Where are the kids? Or do they not live with you anymore? I'm not a cuckoo, and I would never abandon my children. Don't judge me by your own standards, Luis. I'll get the tea anyway. Chita baked some amazing cookies. Chita? Our old neighbor? What's she doing here? Luis asked, pacing the living room. She's just visiting. Maybe she'll even move in with us. We make a good family. Mia left the living room. Luis glanced around. Everything here breathed with the past. Almost nothing had changed since Uncle Federico's time. Luis hadn't been here for years. On the table stood a carved chest. He felt a strong urge to open it and take a peek inside. He listened carefully. Mia was still in the kitchen. Cautiously, he lifted the lid and gasped. On top of a stack of books lay his childhood booklet. He had made it himself. On the cover was a fat hedgehog cut out from a children's magazine, and below it was a childishly written title, The Hedgehog's Bite. Luis glanced at the booklets beneath his childhood creation. Mia Torres. Life Under a Copy, or The Hedgehog's Bite, he read on the dark maroon cover. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Luis had written his book when he was about 7. His father had just left the family, leaving his mother with 3 kids. Luis had 2 younger sisters. The boy cried for days, calling his father, but apparently his father had changed his number and was unreachable. At first, Luis thought it was his fault, but his mother assured him otherwise. Then, he started blaming his mother, and that's when the sad, even frightening, story of the hedgehog family was born. Once upon a time, there was a hedgehog family, a hedgehog dad, a hedgehog mom, and 3 hedgehog kids, 1 boy and 2 girls. Hedgehog dad often scolded hedgehog mom for being a bad parent, a bad cook, and a bad housekeeper, and for being ugly and very fat. He was ashamed to show her to his friends. Hedgehog mom cried at night but put up with her husband. Then one day, hedgehog dad left, saying he was tired of this life. The hedgehog kids cried, but nothing helped. Hedgehog mom cried too but tried to cheer up her kids and made them delicious pies. Some time passed. One day, hedgehog dad came back to visit his family. But hedgehog mom was so angry that she bit her husband hard. Blood poured from his side, and 5 minutes later, he collapsed and died. They buried him under a tree near hedgehog mom and the kids' house. The hedgehog kids often visited their father's grave and brought fresh flowers. This is the sad story written by 7-year-old Luis Torres. With sugar? Mia's voice pulled Luis out of his thoughts. What? He looked up from his book and glanced at his wife. Tea with sugar? No, you know I never drink tea with sugar. Have you written the book? Yes, it was published recently. Now, I'm very popular in my circles, Mia smiled. Where did you get this? He waved his childhood book. I found it a long time ago. We had just started dating then and were renovating your apartment. Remember? Yes, I remember. I didn't think you'd keep it, Luis chuckled. That's why I dared to take on this years-long experiment, Luisito. What experiment? He didn't understand. I was curious if you would repeat your father's fate or break out of this vicious cycle. You repeated it, exactly like a carbon copy. And now you're waiting for me to bite you, and for you to die. A tense silence followed. It felt as if a string had been drawn between Luis and Mia, ready to snap and unleash something terrible. You're crazy, Luis managed to say. He then tucked his childhood book under his arm, grabbed Mia's pamphlet from the chest, and headed for the door without saying another word. Mia was left alone. She felt slightly dizzy. Luis's visit had thrown her off balance. She quickly carried the tray with tea and cookies to the kitchen, closed the chest, and sat back down on the floor. Sorting through the garlands suddenly seemed hard. Mia began to feel sleepy. She lay down on the rug, resting her head on a stuffed rabbit, and fell asleep. She dreamed something strange. The dream looked like a poorly drawn cartoon. A hedgehog father was hugging the hedgehog mother, who held a baby hedgehog in her paws. Then the scene changed. Now the hedgehog mother was holding two babies, while the hedgehog father was still hugging her. Then everything became blurry, stripes appeared, and Mia saw the next scene. A square was drawn with chalk on the path, and at the corners stood the hedgehog mother and three baby hedgehogs, while the hedgehog father stood in the center, trying to escape this imaginary prison, but he couldn't. He seemed to have lost his place and his footing in life. And then he fell and died. Mia woke up. She felt pain in her hand. Her own nails had dug into her palm. She had clenched her fist so tightly in her sleep. Mia jumped to her feet, grabbed the notebook lying next to the carved chest, and started sketching and making notes. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice when the front door opened and a group of children entered, followed by their nanny, Chita, carrying a whole bouquet of leaves. "Oh, you've brought out the decorations," exclaimed Idoia. "I wanted to help decorate too," the girl pouted. "That's why I prepared them, so we could do it together." Mia smiled and closed her notebook. That night Mia couldn't fall asleep for a long time. The past kept flooding her thoughts. Mia had a difficult lot in life. Her father always lived his own life, never considering his wife or daughter. Mia realized around the age of 9 that her father had a mistress. She didn't tell her mother because she knew she wouldn't believe her. Her mother practically dissolved into her father, living, you could say, for him, trying to fulfill his every whim. She endured his harshness, excused him when he didn't come home at night. Mia felt like a hostage to this lie. One day, she saw her father embracing a young woman. That was when she knew for sure that her father was cheating on her mother. Then her mother fell ill. Cancer devoured her in just a year and a half. "It's all from lack of love," sighed the neighbor who helped with the funeral. At that time, Mia couldn't understand those words, but later she did, deeply understanding the meaning of that phrase. That's when the girl decided to become a psychologist and help people navigate the complex situations in life. Her father married his mistress Laura a few months after his wife's death. Mia tried to stay out of her stepmother's way. Laura hated children and was constantly yelling at her for no reason. A while later, Mia was sent to a private boarding school. Out of sight, out of mind. That's when the girl realized that in life she could only rely on herself and study hard to achieve something. Mia stuck to her plan, graduated high school with flying colors, and enrolled in university. Gradually, her father and his wife lost contact with her and eventually disappeared altogether. They moved abroad, sold the house, and didn't leave Mia a penny. Mia was finishing university when Luis appeared in her life. He was like a breath of fresh air for her. She thought that finally, she would be happy forever. Luis practically carried her in his arms, spoiled her, showered her with gifts, organized surprises, and told her he had never met a girl like Mia, that he was absolutely happy and wanted a family and children. Mia, who hadn't known care, affection, and love from close ones for many years, felt like she was on a cloud, carried there by an angel ready to give her his love and tenderness. A month after they met, Mia moved in with Luis. He immediately started talking about marriage, about a quiet wedding just for the two of them. They decided it would be a good idea to start by renovating their small apartment, which Luis had inherited from an aunt who had passed away several years earlier. His sisters lived in another city in the apartment that had belonged to their late mother. "Mia, darling, clean out the storage room," Luis said one day, leaving for work. "I can't stand doing that. I think we can throw out almost everything, but go through it just in case. Maybe I'll find a treasure." Mia smiled and kissed her future husband on the cheek. There was indeed a lot of junk in the storage room. Mia was only interested in some tin soldiers in a metal box and a little book made by Luis. Mia decided not to mention the book to her boyfriend. She couldn't stop thinking about it. The pieces fit together. Luis had told her his father had left when he was around 7. That's when Mia decided to embark on this experiment, to marry him and have 3 children. She was curious whether he would repeat his father's fate or manage to break out of the vicious circle. Mia kept all her observations in a special notebook, intending to publish them as a small book. And now that book, titled The Life in Copy, or The Bite of the Hedgehog, lay on her desk, with several more copies hidden in the carved chest. Mia waited. And then, one day, her husband literally kicked her out onto the street with their 3 children. His father had left on his own, but only because the apartment belonged to his wife. He disappeared without a trace a few years after the divorce, heading off on some distant journey. He had dreamed of living on a deserted island, belonging only to himself and nature. Luis assumed that the ocean had swallowed him up. He got what he wanted, Luis said sadly. Now he belongs to the ocean and its creatures, though he no longer belongs to himself. Mia thought her husband didn't want to repeat his father's fate. Maybe that was true, but the script, set for every person from above, ultimately won. The woman didn't cause a scene or try to convince him that he was making a mistake. She just packed up the kids and left. She wondered, if they had nowhere to go, what would he have done? Would he have left on his own? Most likely, yes. Luis smoked 3 cigarettes in a row. He had never smoked before. His head started spinning, and he felt nauseous. On the kitchen table lay a brochure written by his wife, and next to it, a childhood creation of his. Luis massaged his forehead, pressing on the third eye, but the headache wouldn't subside. Life is a copy, he muttered. Indeed, he had repeated his father's fate. Would the ocean's water pull him under too? Unlike his father, Luis had no desire to travel. He kept replaying Mia's words. It was an experiment. Did that mean she never loved him or wanted to build a family with him and have children? No, that couldn't be. He had seen how she looked at him, how she cared for him and their children. But if Mia had foreseen such an outcome, why did she venture into life with him? Why have kids? Luis had no answer to any of these questions. It was hard for him to get into the head of a psychologist. He had never taken his wife's profession seriously, he just let her play around, and it brought in some extra income. Now he was alone. There was no sense of satisfaction, but he didn't want to bring Mia and the kids back either. Luis felt that if he did, he would be doomed, as if he would be trapped in a cage from which he'd never escape. When he decided to erase Mia and the kids from his life, he hadn't thought about it, but now, for some reason, he started reflecting. Why was it hard to breathe when his family was around? Especially after Nina was born. Luis felt like an outsider among them, as if they were pushing him off the comfortable seat, just like in kindergarten. Luis never tried to talk about these feelings with his wife, and he didn't even realize what he was feeling. Only now, after seeing Mia, after the shock of seeing his childhood book, he couldn't shake the thought that he had just blindly copied his father's life, even though he hated him for abandoning his mother, his 2 sisters, and himself. The resentment had choked the 7-year-old boy. He refused to eat and go to school, and then he was even glad his father went missing. He was angry at his mother for crying when she found out. He couldn't understand how she could pity a man who was always rude to her, treated her like an object, and never valued her. He didn't care that his father had left her with 3 small children. He never sent money, never called. Was he suffocating in his own family too? Did he just run away, not knowing what to do? Luis's head was splitting with pain. Then he sent a message to Mia. He needed to talk to someone who knew. He found no better option. He asked his wife to meet. They sat in a cozy cafe. It was only 9:30 in the morning, so there were very few visitors. People were rushing around looking for gifts and Christmas decorations, too busy for cafe chats. Mia, forgive me, Luis suddenly said, nervously twisting a napkin in his hands. What happened, Luis? She asked softly. You know, butterfly. He had always called her that before. You're going through a tough time. Yes, you have no idea how hard, he sniffed. Living someone else's life is always hard, Mia sighed and stirred her coffee with milk. What do you mean? Luis stared at her. They still hadn't divorced. Apparently, neither of them needed to or cared whether they were married or not. Your father. He couldn't fit into the framework he set for himself. Mia pulled out a notebook and started drawing. You see, he was trapped between you, your sisters, and your mom. But life doesn't have to be a square. Imagine if he had managed to break, or rather, change the boundaries of that square. He could have turned it into a pentagon, at least. Then his place wouldn't have been lost, it would have become even more important. Mia drew a pentagon, building a triangle on top of the square, and then erasing the bottom side of the triangle with an eraser. See, you can become the king, Mia quietly said, pushing the notebook toward Luis. Luis stared at the drawing for a long time, and then beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Mia, what should I do? He suddenly asked, almost childlike. It depends on what you want, Luis. I just don't want to repeat my father's fate, that's all. Then try to expand the boundaries of your life, the ones you're used to. How? If you want, we can work through it with neurography, Mia smiled. I can help you. This method allows working with familiar people and relatives. Neuro what? Neurography. You can read about it online, or you can just trust me. Mia took a sip of coffee. By the way, the coffee here is excellent. I'm ready. Butterfly, Luis smiled for the first time in half an hour. Luis started coming by every other day, and they worked on his fears and mental patterns. Mia, I'm sorry I thought your profession was worthless, Luis said after another session. It's okay, let's move on. That's called devaluing others to feel important yourself. Don't think about that now, think about what you've already achieved. And you've achieved a lot. I even like the idea of being the king in one of the corners of the polygon, Luis chuckled. I told you it's better than sitting in the middle without your rightful place and being squeezed by those who are in theirs. Mia, can I spend Christmas with you? He looked her straight in the eyes. Of course you can, Luis. The kids will be happy. Thank you. Thank you for not getting bitter, not pushing me away, and agreeing to work with me. Oh, come on, Luis, we're not strangers, she covered his hand with hers. They sat in silence for a while longer, then Luis went home. Mia could see that he felt lighter, and she was glad. It's time to write the next little book. About how the hedgehog's bite isn't always scary, and it's not even guaranteed that she'll bite, Mia thought to herself. The day before Christmas, Clara approached Mia and asked, Mia, can we celebrate Christmas with you? My dad will just crash on the couch and stare at the TV again, and I get so bored. We used to always come up with something fun with Mom, but now... Clarita, my dear girl, Mia hugged her tightly, of course, we will celebrate together. We're friends, after all. I wish Dad would marry you, Clara said sadly. Why, sweetie? Mia looked into her eyes. You're cool, kind, and fun. You'd definitely cheer him up. He's lonely. He's always just been with me. He's become a little wild. You're such a thoughtful daughter, Clara. So mature. You care so much about your dad. I really want both of you to be happy. Then marry him. He'd be a good husband. Clara, but to get married, you have to love each other, right? Yes, I agree. Without love, marriage is just empty, Clara said seriously, looking at her. You don't love him, do you? Do you still love your husband? The one who sent you and your kids away? Clara, sweetheart, it's not that simple. You see, Luis isn't to blame for it. I'll explain later, okay? It's hard to understand right now. You think I'm just a little kid? Clara pouted. No, not at all. It's just that even adults find it hard to understand. The human mind is a complex thing. Your dad will find his match, and I'll look after you until you grow up. Deal? Mia held out her hand to the girl. Deal. Clara brightened up a bit, high-fiving Mia and chuckling softly. Good girl. Mia said cheerfully, hugging Clara again. It had been a long time since everyone had such a joyful Christmas. Dona Chita had prepared so many dishes it seemed she could open a restaurant. The children ran back and forth, hunting for presents in every corner. The most interesting thing was, they found them. Who set it all up remained a mystery. Mia suspected that Luis and Felipe had teamed up to surprise the kids. When did they manage to plan it? The children fell asleep right in the living room under the Christmas tree. Felipe had to carry his daughter to bed. Exhausted from the holiday preparations, Chita also went to sleep. Should we move the kids to their rooms? Luis asked when he and Mia were alone. Let them sleep for now. I laid out a soft blanket under the tree. I used to fall asleep like that often as a child, she smiled, looking warmly at her husband. One Christmas, I went out searching for a miracle. My mom was terrified, raised the whole police force, and I came back sad, really sad. Didn't find your miracle? Mia leaned back on the couch. No, butterfly. But I believed in it so much. My mom told me back then that miracles exist, but you just can't see them. They might come into your life later. I wish I had known your mother, Mia sighed. She was a strong and wise woman, from what I understand. She was right, Mia. One day, a miracle did happen. That's when I met you. But I betrayed that miracle, he slapped his forehead. I betrayed it, turned my back on it. You didn't betray it. You just got really lost, Luis. You know, butterfly, maybe we should build a new house here. Or at least add an extension. It's good living here. You really think so? Mia was surprised. Maybe we shouldn't rush things? Therapy isn't finished yet. I wasn't planning to rush. Let's just start fresh, huh? A polygon can have even more angles. Mia stayed silent. She couldn't find the right words and just looked at Luis, delighted by the changes she was witnessing in him. Sometimes, one conversation can turn a person's life 180 degrees. Mom. Raul burst into the house. Your books have arrived. Oh. Great. Thanks, son. Mia went to meet the delivery person. When she stepped onto the porch, a captivating scene unfolded before her. Ana, the delivery woman, was chatting pleasantly with Felipe, who happened to be passing by. Clara ran up to Mia. Would she make a good bride for your dad? Mia grinned slyly. What if she's married? Clara whispered back. Doesn't seem like it. She's been coming here to deliver my books for a while now. Then we've got to move fast. No hesitation, Clara said seriously, winking at Mia. Mia sat in her small office. Now she could afford one. Felipe had built such a lovely house. It wasn't huge, but it was so functional and cozy that the Torres family would never want to leave it. Ana did end up marrying Felipe, just as Mia and Clara had planned. They were now expecting a baby. A polygon with countless angles and sides resembles a circle, and as we know, a circle symbolizes harmony, Mia typed quickly. She was working on her next book. This time it wasn't self-published, but under a contract with a publisher. She glanced at her wedding ring, gleaming on her finger. Her husband had polished it to a dazzling shine just the night before.